Nice.
Okay.
Man, so many tabs. Universalities is very interesting. I think like yeah, I was talking to my brother about this ages ago, but then I was talking to Stefan about something about this and in one aspect of when people were talking about I don't know if we're starting conversation now or I should wait. But yeah, it's interesting. But really
Yep.
fascinating in terms of if I think about a universal truth and how people look at Bitcoin is a good example,
Okay.
right? It's a universal truth based upon a ledger. Um, so like,
When you say
it's
universal
it's
truth,
immutable.
you mean? Oh yes, I know what you mean. It's like no one can stuff around with it without anyone else knowing. Like it's
Yeah,
yeah
and
yeah
it's
yeah
it's like
yeah yeah. So if someone
yeah,
modifies it, everyone
exactly. And
knows that it got
it's
modified. Yeah.
that's exactly right. Yeah. And which is kind of the point of it, right? It's like I don't need a bank or I don't need someone to safeguard a ledger who's highly trusted,
It's
right? I've
basically like
managed to,
it's basically like uh,
yeah, I've,
taking care of the the account management of funds. Um, but yeah,
and being trusted in a way to do that because it is known to everyone that if a dollar is changed on this ledger, like if that happens, right? Like
yeah,
this ledger is viewable to everyone. Everyone can see the fact that like someone's moved a dollar here or a dollar there. I don't have to trust a third party to hold the truth for me, right?
yeah.
We we like actually can like have a way to verify the truth of this without having to really trust anyone in a way. Um, which is fascinating, I think. And like it's fascinating in a way that has got nothing to do with money. Um, because like um, it's like um, think about memes or mimetic organisms or like cultural ideas and like perspectives that you can have. Like you can have like a certain perspective on something and you can hold it to be true in a certain way, or you could have a truth hidden from you in some way, like I mean, like to use like a cultural thing, like Jeffrey Epstein, like that's a truth that's hidden, right?
Oh, I see.
You know,
Yes, we don't know what's the real deal. Yeah, okay. But Bo brought up something
was like
very very interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
that was right. I suppose, yeah, and yeah, it's fascinating. It's and it's more than money. It's something that's like for the first point, anyone can look at something and know like this is the case, and
Mm.
um, and that's like a technological phenomenon. But then when I think about like in a social group, I was talking about this with my brother Tim actually. There's something like a social consensus blockchain, if you think about it, that human beings perform, where like we share with information about, let's say, each other, about the past, or about things that we know that we share with each other that form a social consensus about what is also shared truth, um,
Right,
which is fascinating.
there's also I'll say something about that. It was in a, I think it was a YouTube clip or something about a language. That's it, language learning. And apparently in English, we actually have a whole system. It wasn't known before, but we kind of discovered it after using, I don't know, computers or whatever to decipher the language. There is a unwritten rule about how to describe things. We have to describe things in a certain order, and we learn it
Hmm.
as kids. Like you will say, I think their example was the red, green, the red big tennis ball or something. You can't say
Big red tennis ball.
a red tennis ball. And if you say, and you keep adding to it, like say a red, shiny, bouncy tennis ball, or whatever, and if you keep growing that, the order in which you say the adverbs, the adjectives, whatever, it it has to be in a certain order. Otherwise, it sounds strange. Who would have thought?
So I just
So I don't
quick
know, like based on this book that I'm reading,
In
kind of what it sounds like is universality is essentially digital versus analog. So the way it was explaining it is digital is discrete, analog is kind of continuous. So you
yeah,
need a discrete language that is universal, that can then be applied to kind of any kind of thing that you're describing, whether it's language for what you're doing or like language about math or whatever it is. You need to have this discrete symbolic system. And so, like when we talk to each other, we are effectively talking in a digital format, right? Because we form discrete words from like a continuous flow of sound, right? But it's only the discrete words themselves in a digital format that mean that it can then be applied kind of in different universal kind of ways. I don't know, like,
okay. I have another way of
uh,
phrasing it.
makes
If you want,
sense.
um,
hmm
if this is the same thing, correct me if I'm wrong. But we have thoughts. We, through the process of evolution over many thousands of years, developed just inherently a system to convey those thoughts via this squiggly thing in our mouth.
Symbols.
Yep. And so it
Yeah.
is our neocortex talking to, well, our neocortex is the size of a napkin, apparently, a table napkin. And it can create a series of sequences to flap this tonguey thing around to create audio, which then gets received by your cochlea, then retranslated into the same thoughts. So it's basically my table napkin is talking to your table napkin through this process. And
yeah, but it's
digitization and
probably even more than that.
symbolism is
Like,
part of it.
you're kind of saying that, you translate to the words from your
Hmm.
thoughts, but in reality, the language itself shapes your own thinking. And so
Oh,
whatever,
yeah,
Yeah.
I
so
didn't.
what
Yeah.
you learn, like, so
Yeah.
Like when
when
I
you're a
speak
little
French,
kid and
I
you run
actually
around, that's why
speak
like
different. I actually
you'll hear
think
those random
differently when I speak
stories of
French.
like you hear those random stories of like the kid that like was in the woods or its parents like left him in a basement or something like that, and
Yeah.
so they never learned how to speak, and that their minds just
They
work
haven't has no
completely
infrastructure.
differently.
Yes, has no framework. Um,
Well, I mean, yeah, just they don't have all they don't
the
have
symbols. Yes,
the symbolic system. Yeah. So
that's
like
right.
I think it's more
It's
than that. I think it's like
It's
um
framework to think.
yeah.
Yeah, like maths is a
Exactly. And
framework
so I think
to
maybe that's
reason.
why, like, at the moment, like, one of the big things is like, woke versus, you could say this like this reactionary, there's like a reactionary right, and then there's kind of a woke, and you could say the woke agenda or whatever. But I think all of that, why it matters so much is because of the symbology of things.
Oh,
Because like this is like
yes.
a
you mean
symbolic
compelled speech?
language.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
therefore speech and like what things mean is really important because you can basically just completely change like how people see
Perception.
the world by changing the nature of language.
Yes,
Like,
we discussed this
Yes.
before, right? Like in Russian, they have many words for the color blue, so they can
mm,
distinguish more blue than English speakers. Whereas in English speakers, we have a specific color, a specific name for a certain type of red, and we call it pink, even though it's literally a light red, and we can tell the color pink from a mile away. And other people think, oh, that's just red. No, no, it's pink. It's pink. So, there's a lot of examples like that where uh, the language framework, as you said, helps us think in certain ways, uh, and then you
yeah,
can
man,
you
the
can
language
skew it.
framework is like it's programming. Like
Mm.
like what you read and what you think about things.
And
Like
then
it's a symbolic system.
it brings up potentially more discussions about, if we start to develop some sort of telepathy in the future through like neural link or whatever it's called, will we bypass language, or can you be speaking Russian and I be speaking Chinese, and we could still understand each other even though we're using different frameworks? Because I don't know. What about if we connect our dog or cat?
So what are you going to be speaking though? Like, so if the premise is it's a
I think
symbolic system for thinking, then, how are you going to talk to someone who's talking in a different thinking in a different language?
Well, have you had a
there's a
discussion in
really good
a?
book.
Have you had? Sorry, one thing. If you've had a discussion in a language, have you ever spoken something in another language, and you remember the discussion, but you can't remember which language you were using?
I only know
Have
one
you?
language, so I'm kind of
All
at a
right.
disadvantage. Yeah.
Sometimes I'll have a discussion, and I'm like, I remember, but it's like I can't remember the words because I was speaking something else. So it's like I
That makes
remember
sense.
what we were talking about, but I don't remember how we were talking about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's in programming is isomorphism, right? So it's
Okay,
like
yeah.
so how do I have data or information and I want to transform it into another format, right? But without damaging or permanently changing the initial data construct. So like a good example of this might be like a good example of this. It may be I'm reading a book about this. It's really good. It's Gödel Escher Bach. But let's say I had like
Oh, you're
music, right?
reading
For
you're reading
Yeah,
Godel
it's really
Shabak.
fascinating.
It's
Yeah,
I
it's fascinating.
I got like halfway through that book, and
yeah.
it's really tough going. It is really tough going. It's all like emergent systems, self-referential systems. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, I love the it's what's the word? It's like it's almost more like what Gödel Escher Bach to me, and I haven't finished reading it, but it seems to be talking about is how do we actually think?
Mm.
And then how do we actually take what we think and communicate what we think to other people? And then how do we translate things that we think into different formats? And one of the examples I'm reading about at the moment is like you have Bach, right? Obviously, in the name. And he would write these songs and the song would have a beat, let's say, and the beat would go, let's say, right. But then to make the beat sound good and add a layer to it, he would then make it go left, but in a certain way that it wouldn't lose the meaning, but it would come together with the rest of the meaning, stuff like that. And um, I don't know, it's fascinating. And I feel like where am I going with this? I think um, when we're talking about communication and symbols and these different things, and I think about there's another book called The Chrysalids, which is literally about like a group of people that like can like read each other's minds and send information between each minds. Which is, I recommend reading. They transmit information through things called thought shapes, which is like interesting. So it's like instead of using a tongue to communicate through language, they're directly sending a completely different type of
Shape.
information construct to each other,
That was the
right?
basis for that movie with the aliens coming. Can't remember the name. It's had
Arrival.
Arrival.
Yeah,
That's it.
rival.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's an example of where
Yeah.
our language, we we convey like the delta, and we just assume that the body of information, the
Yes.
context, is already synchronized, and then you just explain the delta, and then you assume that okay, they get it. Whereas they are like creating the entire situation and sending it with the context in one thing. So there's no ambiguity, no nothing. It's like you can't f it up, basically the communication. Whereas we've got just double entendres and
It's episodic.
yeah.
Hmm.
But then I don't know if
Yeah,
they can make
I think in
jokes. We
our
can make jokes in our language.
that I mean
I
that's
have
actually
one.
really
It was
true, isn't it?
amazing. I just saw it just before we started the podcast. It had an alien, and then it had an alien with two hands together, like this, and it wrote IT alien Italian. Right? That was so funny. And you couldn't do that with their language. You can do it with our language. It's hilarious.
So fast.
Yeah.
I suppose like yeah, that's really fast. That's a really good point. Because I suppose the point is that like the humor comes from the fact that you have to make the leap or something
Yeah.
mentally, and it's funny.
It's
Yeah,
funny.
and
It's
it's almost
like
like yeah, I don't know, it's fascinating.
it's like you gain something and you lose something, and
That's why some
That's the
jokes are
funny
really
humor.
hard to
translate to another language. Yeah.
translate to another language, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't have that background, and the language doesn't quite translate the exact same thing, and therefore you have to then explain the joke. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
You know what's funny? In French, when you say how old you are, you say I have 30 years. And people are like, that's so bizarre. And I'm like, no, it's not. We how long have you been how many years programming experience do you have? Oh, I have 15 years programming experience. Oh, you just use have for experience. Experience is something you have with you, but age is something you are. Where in French, experience and age are something you both just have with you. And the French, in France, the culture, age isn't really as I don't know. It doesn't screw around with your mind as much. Whereas in English speaking, because you are your age, I am 35 or 25, whatever. Women just go, oh, I am 40 now, and it's just
Really?
a
So
ego
you think
distraction.
that French people are less
Yeah, less
That's so
susceptible to
obsessive about
that.
interesting.
their
It's like, I
age
have
because
40
of how
years.
they say it?
Yeah. We say it too. It's like, I
Well, it's
have
almost
40
like
years programming experience. I know. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
well, it's almost like what you were saying before when we're talking about like, we're using what is something really simple to communicate as a symbol, right? It's almost like a two-dimensional thing. I got recommended a book by Stephen Pinker on like writing and communicating better recently. And one of the things in the book it says is knowing when to talk about webs, sentences, and strings, right? Which is like almost like a graph, like lots of information, like a sentence, like less information, and just in a single word.
Oh, okay.
And it almost like implies me it's like in the English language when you talk about age, it doesn't just as an age, it's like how long until you've got left. It's got none of the context of all the memories and the experiences that you captured, like that you have had from how long you've lived, which is like this really important thing. It's just like how long you've got left. It's just one thing. It's nothing else behind it, right? Maybe in
Right.
France, like the age doesn't mean like this is just a number. It
It
means like this
separates
is
the
a number
individual.
connected to,
Yeah.
but it's also about the fact that that is how like that's a representation of how much experience the individual has versus like how long they
Yeah.
have left.
Yeah.
It's also culture, not just language, right? I mean, it's the
Yeah,
combination of both, right?
Mm.
Right. So there's
yeah, it's so fascinating.
no, that's right. It's interesting, but I think there's a cultural aspect to that as well, where you like we have a big cultural difference between America and Australian, right? We still speak the same language, but we have different cultural systems and things like that. We have different meanings
Language.
to the way certain languages are used and things like that, right? Yeah.
They were stumped by some of the simplest words. Like, I would say, I reckon this, and they were like, excuse me, reckon? What's that? I'm like, are you serious? You don't know what reckon is? And I said, I am going to my car.
It's interesting.
Car? Oh, car. Well, I said, you got stumped by just the word car. That's a bit bizarre, but yeah. Yeah.
Well, it makes it
There you
difficult
go.
to communicate, right? And they've got different words like we would vacuum the floor, right? I'm going to vacuum the floor
Yeah.
with my vacuum cleaner, but they would hoover the floor. So it's almost like functions are names, like names of products have become functionalized.
Yeah,
which is very, very
I
unusual.
was
We find
aware
that
of a
very
bunch
unusual.
of them. Yeah, like
Mm.
footpath, they say sidewalk. We say
Yeah.
tap, they say faucet. Cookie. I think we still use cookie because of the browsers, but we normally say biscuit. No, just a
Yeah,
few
that's true.
crazy things, but yeah.
Don't get us
Oh,
started on Fahrenheit.
Language is amazing.
this is the funny thing. We will say fireman and policeman, and we say mobile phone. They don't. They say mobile phone,
What do they say?
Cell phone, usually.
a cell
They
phone,
call it
or
cell
they'll
phone.
say mobile.
Yeah.
So their elongated vowel is actually the opposite. It's like mobile. It's the shrunk version, and ours is the elongated version. Whereas normally it's like the Americans have got the elongated long sounds in their words. It's not always the case. Also, turbine. We say turbine. They say turban, which I found really weird.
So like it's so fat. Like we're talking about language from the beginning and how it shapes perception. I had this I was talking to someone who was talking to me about pharmaceutical industry. Um and these words, I think it was you have mental health or you have mental illness, treating mental illness, and then you have working on mental wellness, let's say, or you have like it's almost like the same meaning. It's like if you're buying a pill, it could be treating a mental illness, or it could be working on your mental wellness, right? Could be the same. It could be doing the exact same thing, but one of those perspectives, those two words, one of them is saying to a person, it's saying that like work on wellness, and the other one's telling the person like you're ill and you need to buy this pill,
Yeah,
right?
even that can be very
Um,
powerful. Yeah, I mean it's the whole thing about
it's
the
extremely powerful.
yeah compelled speech. It's like people don't want to identify as something because it's crushing them inside. So it's yeah, it's so powerful. It's yeah. I think
But
we don't appreciate that. I mean, I
it's
don't.
universality.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
So how does
Well,
this?
no, I definitely
I think
we're
the
talking about
danger,
subjectivity and objectivity.
the danger of some of that compelled speech is that
Oh,
you're
um,
removing meaning from the world, right?
Brendan, your
It's almost.
mic.
Yeah.
Can you bring your mic up?
Oh, sorry. Can
Yeah.
you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's better. It's louder.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the thing with compelled speech is it's like sometimes people want to use different pronouns and stuff like that. The problem with that is it removes meaning from the world. Once you start changing language, you are removing meaning and creating ambiguous speech, right? And that's one of the bad things of it, because obviously, when we talk about a group of people and there's a man or a woman or whatever it is, there's a visualization of what's there, what the situation is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Once you start trying to use this inclusive language, we can understand there's a place for it, but once you use inclusive language and say, well, we can't call them that, well, now you don't know what is there, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes that doesn't matter, right? And other times it does, right? And so the danger is if we start changing language to remove meaning from it, then you miss that nuance of describing the situation.
Yeah, like we
Right.
used to be able to just upon inspection, visual inspection, we would be able to work out that's a he or that's a she. And now apparently we can't do that with 100% efficiency. And sometimes if we do assume, we get in trouble. I mean, that's a big issue. Not
Do you
with
And
think
look,
do you think it's adding as opposed to ambiguity or whatever? Maybe it's just making things more complex. So if
Yeah.
like male and female or gender or he she, maybe what it's doing is it's making the system more complex. Like there's someone who
Yeah.
wants to be genetically as a male but wants to identify as a female or something. You're adding complex. You're adding richness or more complexity or more symbology to the system that you're using, right? Like the color pink. Like other people don't have pink, we've suddenly got pink, which is, one of the
This,
new genders or whatever. Um, Maybe it's the beginning of,
It's very
um,
politicized. That's the big
well,
problem.
yeah,
I mean, we don't want to get cancelled, or if this podcast comes up again and people go, "Oh, you said this," we're just talking about the language here, okay? Obviously, so um, the whole problem is, as you pointed out, it's making it more complex unnecessarily. But also, I mean, they wanted to put it. I think they wanted to make a distinction between sexual orientation and gender. And they say, "Oh, we're just not talking about one; we're talking about the other." But then they'll conflate it with, say, if there's a male and female toilets, if you identify as a male, as a female, but you have male, you are physically a male, you want to go in the female toilets. That's that's kind of defeating the whole point of having male and female toilets, because the male toilets have appropriate infrastructure for the male body, and the female toilets have appropriate infrastructure for the female body. So it should then defer to not what you identify as, but what you have.
well, I guess, but like,
Yeah,
technology and everything, I guess we're going to be able to change our plumbing quite a
yeah.
bit pretty soon, right? So I think this
maybe
is
that'll
just like the
solve it.
beginning of it's the beginning of diversification, right? I think it's only going to get more and more diverse because like the amount of
That's
stuff you
fine,
can
but that's
you,
fine,
you
and I think we as transhumanists, support that sort of thing. But the issue is changing language, um, eh, inappropriate, right? So, for instance,
But
if I've got trans friends, right? So that's fine, great. But the problem is that you don't know until you ask, and sometimes it's not polite to ask,
Yeah,
right?
that's
Um,
why it's unnecessarily complex now.
yeah,
It makes things too
and
complicated.
a main problem is the fact that if you're forced to change sort of things, especially publicly or whatever it is, and my problem with the whole thing is that you change the meaning of language and you remove information. Like the whole point of language is to convey information, right? If you can't use he, she, or whatever it is, because that's maybe not inclusive, depending on the situation, of course, right? Then what you've done, if you need to convey that information, right, because that meaning may be important, then you've lost the power to actually describe adequately. And so,
yeah, but I guess we kind of do that all the time, right? Like if
yeah,
you were to say I need to use the bathroom, like that's one way of saying I want to go to the toilet, which is
of
another
course.
way of saying, something else, right? Like, and each one of them is conveying like more information, but kind of in a more direct way, right? So
And
a lot of like,
yeah,
you
and
know,
also you're assuming the context. And if you look at the language in what it's literally saying, sometimes it's ambiguous. Like for example, if I say I like to eat sushi with chopsticks, does that mean you've got the sushi there and you're using chopsticks to eat sushi, or you eat sushi and you put chopsticks on it and you eat it with the sushi? Like,
Yeah, you
do you like
chopsticks.
eating sushi with tomato sauce?
Yeah,
Do you like eating sushi with chopsticks?
yeah,
So you,
that's the problem with language, right?
yeah, because you've got the
There's an
context
assumption.
already,
Yeah,
and you were
that's right.
just
Yeah,
sending the delta. Yeah.
yeah. But that's a good
I
topic,
like I
like a good example, I should say, because
Hmm.
we literally do say we're eating it with chopsticks, and it sounds like you're actually eating the chopsticks as well,
well,
right?
you wouldn't say that in Japan, right? No one would everyone would be like, well, no shit, yeah, like what
exactly.
else are you gonna be doing? It's more, I think, so what it's context specific to,
Yeah,
say, Australians. Like, not only can I eat sushi, I can eat sushi with chopsticks. Like I have that
exactly. Yeah.
level of sophistication. The sushi only drops off the chopsticks every now and again, right? I'm getting, I'm getting there.
I
Yeah.
think I agree with I think the point I agree largely with the point Stefan's making. And the color pink is a really interesting one, right? Because the color pink used to be a boy's color before I think World War One or World War Two.
Oh,
And
really?
then through World War One, yeah, through World War I and World War II, all the women stayed back and were essentially working in factories to make armaments, and they were doing all these different things to help the war effort. And pink became associated with what they were doing through that process, and its meaning actually changed to be feminine,
Oh wow.
Mm.
right?
Same
So
with
like,
the
so
Hollywood. Yeah,
that,
sorry.
Advertising, basically. So they found out
whoa,
they could split. Well, the thing is, like, you can sell perfume to a man and a perfume to a woman just by changing the labeling on the packet. And now instead of just selling one for both people, you can sell it, which is exactly the same, smells the same. They slap another label on it, right?
Different
And
price.
they found out that they could sell more toys for kids by saying boys have blue stuff and girls have pink stuff, and then they could sell more products basically, because then this is the girl's product, this is the boy's product. It's the same product, but we have a different label on it. And they found out that was very, very effective as a marketing strategy. And then, of course, now it becomes like, oh, it's pink, so it must be a girl's thing, right?
Mm.
It's amazing how
I
language
mean
has
that is
changed.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Do you
mean,
think though,
Well,
like,
I
how
think
much
that's
of it
a,
is so if the language is about determining gender roles, right? So then how much is it about like, well, should there be specific gender roles for people or shouldn't there be? Like, because so if you're saying, okay, this is a girl's
yes.
toy or this is a girl's color or all that stuff, what you're effectively doing is saying, there's a particular way that a particular gender is supposed to be, which isn't necessarily the same as the other gender, right? So I think a lot of and I kind of get it, like I think a lot of the kind of cultural stuff is really, you know, should we be ubiquitous or, do we need to acknowledge that people can have differences? But then I think it gets more nuanced because you could say, well, yes, people are different. Men are different to women and have like different, there's different things that they're going to have to do in their life or how they're going to feel and things like that. But then you can get more nuanced. And I think the greater nuance is then when you start getting a difference between sex and gender, because then it's saying, well, I may be a male, but I identify as a female in terms of from a gender perspective, because that is how I want to like project myself or
perceived.
be perceived and how I want people to treat me, because obviously genders get treated differently as well, right? Um,
Yes. Yes.
so it's yeah, it's an interesting one, and I
Yes.
think it's only going to get more and more diverse. But I think, maybe the one thing that I would like to see change is I think it's all good having as many genders or being more nuanced around how you want to project yourself. Provided society can handle it. Because if this is a level of symbology, then okay, if you're gonna have different genders, then there's only something that you're going to be able to remember, right? And then they're all going to start conforming to a particular way that gender should operate. Um, I think that's all. I think that's all good. I think the one thing I probably am not as big a fan of is more like victimhood. Like, so the idea that one particular either gender or race or whatever is the victim of others and therefore needs a form of affirmative action. Like,
Reparations. Yes.
or whatever it is. Like, it could be sexual equality or whatever. Like, what do you call it? Like, affirmative action for women or whatever it is. Like,
Yep.
that's when I get a bit. I don't know. I was talking to someone recently, and they were saying like one of one of the reasons. Well, again, who knows for sure, right? But like, say one of the reasons why in say Thailand there are a lot of transsexuals, right? A lot of people doing ops or changing. It's got nothing to do with the fact that people have always felt like a woman or whatever. It's all to do with basically economic incentives. Like if people feel, wow, I'm going to have a much better life as a woman than I will as a man. Like whether it's like in terms of social status, money, whatever, people are going to change genders. Like
Yeah. 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 I see
money,
what that is.
money drives a lot of things, I think, or like
Yeah.
money and social status.
That's a very good point. That is a
Yeah.
very good point.
Because
It is
because otherwise, how do you
incentives
explain
based.
like how, yeah, certain countries they have like a big change in like the gender dynamics and things like that.
And also, to support your point, I think there was something like if a teenager's growing up and their best friend is transgender, they are like 50% or 100 or what some increased propensity to follow that themselves. So even just by that single data
Social
point there,
contagion.
that is reflective of, it is incentivized. Is this going to affect me in my circle of friends, in the community? How are people going to see me? Oh, I'm going to do this. Maybe it's not necessarily
Yeah.
something that's just absolute within
Gets more
them.
complicated.
Yeah.
But is it demonized? I mean, I
if
don't know too much about Thailand's transgender community, but are they demonized as much as they are in the West and the United States? Because I mean, I know that in Australia and the United States, there's a lot of suicides in the transgender community. But is Thailand similar? It's more accepting, apparently, isn't it, in Thailand?
More accepting.
Yeah. So there's this big mental health epidemic amongst trans people in Australia and the United States, which is why they were trying to pass some of these new laws to being like conversion therapy and all sort of stuff, right? Or forced conversion therapies for people, because it's playing out into a lot of mental health issues and a lot of suicides and things like that. But in Thailand seems to be not demonized, and therefore I would say there'd be the instances of suicides and things like that from people who are transgender would be much less, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's more accepted by the community, right?
Yeah, it's not got that Judeo-Christian kind of baggage, right?
Oh yeah.
I don't know, it is like I feel like I mean this reminds me of the people that made The Matrix.
Oh, the
The
Wachowskis.
thing is
Oh yeah, they
the
both were
Wachowskis,
transgender,
right?
aren't they? Didn't they both
Yeah,
become
they
They are
like?
now,
changed.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that only one was
Yeah.
first,
And then
I
the
think
second one
second
changed.
one then
Yep.
became
And there's something so fascinating about that to me because these two people that they were so interested in the future and the idea of complete self-autonomy, like complete, I am what I decide to be, right? I create myself, right? In a construct, in my construct that I have decided is my construct. And I just think these two artists, because I thought about this a bit more recently, and one of these artists is this guy called Bocamp, who did these urinals, and said they weren't urinals; they're actually pieces of art in art galleries.
I've seen them.
And the other artist,
I've seen them.
yeah, and the other artist, what's the other guy's name? Is
He turned the
Magritte, and
urinal sideways.
he,
Did he turn the urinal sideways and he called it art? Yes, that's amazing.
yeah, and then the other artist, Magritte, what he did is he took an image. I think of the image there. It says it's a image of a pipe, and underneath it says, "This is not a pipe." Right? And it was just like him saying to these people that were taking these urinals and these different things and saying they weren't what they actually pragmatically were, and he was saying, no, actually, like not everything is conceptual, right? And like I think like both those positions, I mean, and that's true as well, right? It's like, there's words, and then there's like the periodic table.
Yeah,
And
I
like
think
where the line in between those two things are is hard to work out.
I think it's anything political. It can get like can just get words could be used to, malign or constrain or change the meaning of things. Like if you're talking about Gaza, you can talk about Palestinians being killed by, bombs, or you could say, Palestinians are being murdered by Israelis, right? Like, and it's both. The act is the same. It's just using a different kind of language to
Spin.
describe it.
Yeah.
I mean, like
The truth is
like
that
what's
there's
his
just
name?
people being murdered.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Orwell.
the
I
idea
mean,
is
like
that
George
The idea
Orwell,
is
Orwell,
yes.
like 1984, that was the whole point. They were simplifying the
It was,
language.
what was the name of it?
Newspeak.
Doublespeak? Sorry, what was it?
Yeah,
New,
doublespeak.
so the language was
Newspeak.
Newspeak, and
That's
then
it.
the what you're
Yeah.
talking about is doublespeak. Doublespeak
Doublespeak.
being
1
where
plus 2
you
equals 4 or something. Yeah.
5.
well, it's just it's no. You can see examples of doublespeak all through our language as well, right? So
Yeah.
after World War II, they renamed the Ministry of War to the Ministry of Defense.
Defense, yeah.
Whereas, like, what he did is he's called it the Ministry of Peace. So the Ministry of Peace is responsible for war.
And there's
know what
always
I
a
mean?
war
Like-
going on.
Yeah, like, but
Amazing.
what I mean
Yeah.
is, it's like the use of symbology to like kind of control narrative and
And control how people think.
yeah,
So,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
It's very,
Which
very important.
controls
yeah.
reality.
Yeah, exactly.
Controls reality,
It's
right?
not
It's
just
like,
how people think; it is reality. Yeah, exactly.
It's actually reality. It's like even art. It's one of the fascinating things I always
Yeah.
find about art galleries, right? Is
Yeah,
you go to art gallery and the rich people in the world own and control art galleries. So why do they do that?
It's for
Right?
tax
And it's
reasons.
partly, I think, because like,
It's
but it's not
tax.
just for that. But that's part of it. It's partly tax, but it's also the fact that like,
When you have 200
it's in a
grand
way
left,
controlling ideas.
it's the best way to
You're
get
controlling
tax break.
ideas.
You just buy some art before the end of financial
I
year.
mean, that's not untrue. But if I were to go back 100 years or 200 years, and I wanted to like have a mimetic, I wanted people to think or see things in the way that I wanted them to see it, right?
Yeah.
And the only way that people really have a TV or something is they look at a canvas, right? And they look on this canvas, and I paint the canvas, and I paint it in the way that they will see it, and all they see is anything that I've painted on this canvas, and then all that exists is the canvas that I made and paid for, and it's like obviously there's new versions of that today, right? But I think like it's a worthwhile thing to reconcile with, and I think what's fascinating about what we're even talking about is the fact that like we're talking about these different forms of words and perceptions that aren't actually controlled by very small groups of people, which is another aspect to it. It's like highly fascinating. It's like
Like,
it's
I mean,
there's a
that's
lot
why,
more
like,
people creating different perceptions.
That's why with art, like some of my friends did, art history at uni. It's all about describing art. Like it's all about writing, say, a
Yes.
good novel to explain the nature of the art.
Yes.
So to translate that
Yes, it is.
symbolism
Yes,
to
funny.
this, and that is it. And
This
even
means
if you buy
this.
if you
Yes.
buy an expensive art, what you're buying is a whole lot of the narrative. Like, so it's a famous artist, like Van Gogh, like famous artist. There's only one. He did it then. It was owned by these people. It is thought to convey this by that. So then what you're actually paying for you're paying for the artwork, right? But really, you're paying for a lot more, right? You're paying for a whole lot of symbology. This is the
Yes.
original. Well, you think it is. This was done by this artist. Well, this means that to these people. You know what I mean? And that is, it's like all this
Yeah.
contextual value.
Yeah, I posted Cy Twombly's 5 Greek poets and a philosopher artwork. Did you see that in WhatsApp?
I did.
Right, that's it.
Yeah.
It's basically
That's all right.
this. I got to turn the brightness all the way down. Maybe you can see it now. No?
No.
It's 5 Greek poets. Try it one more time. Here we go. There. Can you see that? No.
I've seen it though. It's good.
Yeah, and it's just like it's on sale now for $73,000, which is pretty
Not
good
bad.
because he was one of the most influential artists for, I can't remember what the official term is, but it's scribble art. So his art looks like scribble, and he made that, which I don't know. Good luck for the person who bought it. But the point is, you buy it and it grows in value. It grows
Well,
in
unless
value.
you're buying NFTs, right? Like, so it's all about like the idea.
Yeah.
Like sometimes ideas take off, sometimes they don't.
If you
Like
buy a
NFTs
piece
don't-
of art, you have to house it in your house, which means you have to get an alarm. Your solicitor will tell you to, or your accountant will tell you, get an alarm system. Then you have to worry about people burglaring you. But the good thing is there's no stamp duty. You want to give it to your son? Like, here you go, son. Done. Or you can actually sell it. Or if you can't find a buyer, you can just give it to a charity or a museum. They'll take it, and you just get the valuation, and you can claim 100% tax deduction that year.
But how does it work with?
Still
do you
has to
not
be
have capital
culturally
gains
valued.
on art? Is there no capital gains?
No, it's art. But you
Oh.
can only do it for, I think, 30% of your income. So if you have a lot of money that financial year, you tend to wander off to those charity balls and end of financial year art expos, and that's where you put all the
Sports,
art
isn't
on your
it?
house.
No, but can you claim? So you can claim art as an expense. Like, how are you getting a tax rebate on art?
Charity.
It's
They're like houses, but like they're easier to transport and better tax wise.
yeah, it's basically
It could have a lot of money though.
I haven't.
Charity. So like what? If you
No,
so
no,
if
you
you
can
buy the
sell to
art,
it. No, if you have something and you bought it for say
Yeah.
100 grand, it's
Yeah,
now
and you
worth
sell it for
900
200.
grand.
yeah.
Okay, and you're having a pretty bad year.
Mm.
Or you can give that to a charity. You can give it to a charity. Sorry, a museum.
Yeah.
Art museums will just take
You,
it from
you
you.
can also own the museum.
Oh,
You can also own the
see,
museum.
I don't know that, but you can give it to a museum,
And
they
then
will
you get
give
the
you
tax deduction.
100% tax deduction.
Ah, so you get an 800K tax
Yeah.
deduction if you bought it for 100K.
So that's how you can
But
level
then
out
also
your
all the rich
good
people
years and
go to the
bad years.
museum and do
Yeah.
the same thing. So then the other rich people are at the museum or doing the same
You haven't-
thing, which is where you
Your
meet the other
accountant
rich
hasn't
people, have your
given
networking
you the speech.
opportunities. Yeah, that's
Ah.
basically what happens.
I don't think we've got enough money to justify like all this kind of art. But no, I'm not
never-
getting that advice from my
no,
accountant.
neither
You've
do I.
obviously got a very good accountant. My accountant's more like, hey, you need
Incredibly
to
honest.
finish your quarterly zero expenses, like what's this transaction?
If I could quickly bring up another random thing, I've linked a bunch of papers, but one of them is just this bunch of quotes from Wittgenstein, and he's like this language philosopher dude. But one of the really interesting things he talked about was he described language as evolving so human beings could negotiate, basically.
Okay.
So we evolved to have language to negotiate with each other socially. Right?
Yes.
That was his perspective.
Yeah,
Yeah,
makes sense.
that's right. And also another unique thing not unique, another interesting thing I found out about language is the language is there. And you know how we've got those grammar books about grammar? It's like we don't enforce the grammar. We just look at the language, how it's evolving, and we write down how the grammar's changed. So it's like the language is just doing whatever it's doing, and we are just observing it and writing down what we think the rules are.
Yeah, but there's a certain ground set of rules, and then there's the nuances of the way that the language is used, right?
And the French,
That's the question.
the French created a ministry
That is the question.
to preserve the language because the French language is moving, and the French don't want it to move, so they've created this language police to say, no, you have to pronounce it this way and blah 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 blah. Yeah, it's a bit crazy.
Well, back to when you're saying artwork, there's like poetry is also one of the interesting things as well. How we interpret poetry.
All right.
And usually you go to school and you learn a whole bunch of poetry, and you got to see the symbolism, and you got to write a whole bunch of garbage on what that means. And sometimes you go, yeah, I can see that. And other times it's like, how the hell did you get that from that thing? And there was one case where the poet is, still alive, and he saw what the school was teaching, and he went out and says, none of that stuff that the teachers were talking about of the poetry was what he wrote about. They just made it
revisionism,
up, right?
But
it's made it up.
But everyone's allowed their interpretation. It's like,
No, but
like if Jesus came back, he's like, none of what I actually said means whatever you're doing right now. You know, like, come on. It's just like
Yeah.
how did you
How did you get that?
how did you think I meant that? Like,
I think I
No,
was.
but it's
I
funny,
Didn't
right?
walk
Because
on water.
if
That
you,
was the surfboard. Come on.
yeah,
no, because
I think
we read poetry, right? And sometimes you have to try to get the meaning from the poetry, and one person will read it and they'll get something
yeah, everyone
slightly
gets their
different from
own.
another
Yeah.
person, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and
I
we see that all the time. It's like it's GIF. No, it's GIF. Oh, it's GIF. And then the
but
author
even
comes
like in
around.
that
It's
example
GIF.
about
Yeah.
the example of the poet, right? He can you can kind of say on the one hand, well, it's his poetry, therefore he gets to decide what the true meaning of his poetry is. But look, no, the poetry is information. Once he's written it down, it's everyone's information.
So
They're
is
now free to interpret it any way they want.
all right. So
Like,
is
you know,
Descartes a replicant?
Yeah, that's true.
Is Descartes a replicant?
who's Descartes?
Ridley Scott said
Yeah, no,
Descartes
Blade Runner.
is a replicant after like 10 years.
Oh,
And everyone's like,
uh,
what's the stick figure mean? It's too bad she won't live. But then again, who does?
yeah, yeah.
It's like Ridley Scott says in an interview, oh, yeah, Descartes is a replicant. Yeah. That's what I wanted to convey. And everyone's like,
But so if he's a
But
replicant, how come he's so
that's
weak? You know,
brilliant.
he's dangling off the thing. You know that
with
pivotal
one
scene?
finger and all this. Yeah.
Yeah, where he gets
Because
lifted
he's
up.
exactly human.
But then how
Because he's
did that
human.
dude know that he dreams about unicorns with the stick figures? Unless it was
I can't
implanted.
remember Blade Runner that well.
But those guys
Well, I mean,
could
like
have,
that's part of the book.
yeah, but also
Oh, Dream of Electric Sheep. Yeah.
most
Um,
most of those
Yeah, yeah.
Philip K. Dick.
most of those replicants had a certain time to live.
A TTL.
Yeah, they did, right?
Yeah, they did.
Where he didn't. He lived longer, right?
Oh, we don't know
Do we
that.
know that? Like, how long
We
was
don't know that.
the story?
That's why at the very end he said, "We don't know how long we have, but blah blah blah." Just
Well, I think he's meaning the chick, though, right?
Sean Young. Yeah. Oh yeah. We
I
don't know.
suppose that's the point. The point is that he's like, you've gotten to the point where when a replicant is as good as a human, it should be uncertain if they're a replicant.
Yeah, it's like a Turing test and a half.
It's like Schrodinger. It's like Schrodinger's cat. It's like, is it
Part of
like
the
that?
replicants.
Does it matter?
Yeah.
Does it matter? It depends on what you want to think and believe. Yeah,
Yeah,
Schrodinger
exactly,
is,
exactly.
Descartes. Yeah.
It's like trying to
What do you
interpret
believe?
the ending of 2001 Space Odyssey, or the intentions of Hal, right? Like for a start, Kubrick's takes different Arthur C. Clarke's take in his book, but even the way Kubrick set up his plot line, you can derive any kind of meaning you want out of that.
Who
out
was
of
that?
movie.
That was that. The malfunction of Hal was from one of your favorite dudes, Stefan.
Arthur C. Clarke.
No. His name was. Oh, what was it called? It was called a. Yeah.
Prime Directive.
No. Oh, I
The
forgot.
laws are
IBM.
the law, the mission. Yeah, the mission.
Something loop.
Like,
Oh, Hofstadter loop. Hofstadter Mobius loop.
it's actually not Douglas Hofstadter. It's Douglas Hofstadter's dad that he's referencing. So Douglas
Oh, right.
Hofstadter's dad was like some hardcore guy as well.
And they both hated it. They're like, that's not what I meant from. It doesn't matter. But
Yeah.
and also in what is it called? Westworld, the latest realization of Westworld, when that girl gets plugged in via Bluetooth to the tablet and she sees her own thoughts manifesting in front of everyone. And then she goes into a Hofstadter Mobius loop and just conks out. That was
I
one of
don't
my
I don't
favorite
remember.
bits.
I did watch it all, but yeah, I can't really remember.
Yeah.
That's a loop. That'd be a weird loop. Well, I think there's this bring in a different concept, I guess. Like when I'm thinking about like all these multi-agent stuff, right? And thinking, right? And like obviously, well, there are these multi-agents that people are using at the moment, which basically are able to do different tasks, and people use multiple of them to do them together. And I wonder, thinking, like, is thinking just like my little, like, different agents in my mind are just like negotiating amongst each other through time and shit. Fucking trippy. Um, you know,
Yeah.
like, it's the replicant question. At what
Well,
point is a multi-agent system like, oh, are we going to be asking, is it human or not? I don't know.
Let me see if I can do something here. I want to see if I can. Can we watch this? Or we'll just see if it works. Oh,
I was talking to James about that, Michael. He was talking about you could be made up of multiple kind of conscious agents, right? And so if you are in two minds about something, it's really just you negotiating with yourself, right? Yeah, like the
Yes.
whole personhood concept is more like the construct, right? So
it's not working.
Well, that's a really complex question. Like, what does it mean to be like a person? What does it mean to be like
symbology,
second,
man.
the human
Symbology, person. Just say the word, person. You are a person.
person? Well, I mean, like
Mm-hmm.
I was speaking about like in programming, right? Like you're
Mm-hmm.
writing out your programming. If I don't know how many people program it, but you write out a back end thing, and you've got like your context, right?
Yes.
And in your context, you've got your internal timers and stuff, so you can do introspection, right? You got introspection, and it's like, okay, I have these different things, they're all running, right? But then I then access a different function or a method or a class, and I go into this thing and I use this other thing's method, right? And I'm transforming myself in these different ways. And yeah, I don't know, maybe like there's something I've been thinking about a lot recently because it's so like there's something so strange about these language models in the sense that it's almost like, well, am I a chatbot? Am I talking to a chatbot? Are you guys chatbots? I don't know, right? Like, am I more than a chatbot? I hope so. What does that even mean? I have no idea. I should probably work that out. So I've been thinking about this a little bit recently. Like, am I a chatbot? Like, what's my introspection function do? I'm not sure. What does that mean?
Yeah, but
So a bit of a
you
ramble.
you got your consciousness of where you're actually thinking about stuff that you know that you're thinking about stuff. But then you got the stuff that you've already made decisions about unconsciously. And they've put people in MRIs and they've decided that they can actually track that people have already made a decision about something before they've even been conscious of the decision being made. Right?
Yes.
So your consciousness on top go, I made that decision. And the answer is, well, you actually didn't. Your consciousness didn't, because you'd already made the decision before you'd be conscious of that question being formed, right? So your brain has already somehow thought of it. So you've got some underlying autonomous processes. And then you've got your consciousness, which I think the main functions, or its most important, is to look at long-term thinking. Looking, like, introspecting of something that you've made a decision on, being able to have a little bit of a deeper thought, and then your autonomous system goes off to go and think about that a little bit more, right?
Maybe,
right.
but my experience, right? I was really nerdy when I was a kid. So one of the things I would always do when I go into a social environment is like look at the social environment, work out what the social rules are, and replicate as much as humanly possible, right? Michael must survive, right? And which is like I think like an interesting. I think a lot of people have that experience, but it's an interesting experience in some ways, right? Because you, um, I think to some degree everyone does this, right?
Yeah.
If you're in like a high-end sales meeting, you're not exactly going to be espousing your views on, I don't know, like the subjectivity of gender, right? It's probably a bad idea. Just put it out there. I think you should rethink that position. I think you should look at the people that you're talking to and work out like how you can negotiate these people, right? So you have to like in some way like be flexible and fluid in who you are, right? And I was talking to one of my friends recently. This is I really like Jim Carrey. It's his series of movies, right? I've probably spoken about this at length too many times with people, but you look at these movies, he's got one called The Mask. Me and myself narrating these like these really interesting stories. But one of them, he played this comedian called Andy Kaufman,
Andy Kaufman, yeah.
which I found so fun. Like Yeah, and so Andy Kaufman was
The
like
moon
this
guy.
comedian, and what he would do is, yeah,
Yeah.
he'd do these impersonations, right, and become these other people, but he'd never go out of character. And then Jim Carrey's very much the same. So he's playing Andy Kaufman, who's playing another person who's playing Elvis Presley, right? He's playing like 5 layers of different people, right? And Jim Carrey
Mm.
legitimately went insane playing this character, right? It's like there's a documentary about Jim Carrey making this movie, and which is like cool, right? It's kind of neat.
Not
But
only that, because Jim Carrey, he would stay in character. So like, I saw the clip of who I forget which comedian wouldn't this comedian went and saw John Kerry, but John Kerry was in character, so he had to deal with what is it, Kaufman, like the whole time because like that's who Jim Carrey
contacted
was
his
playing.
parents. Jim Carrey contacted Andy Kaufman instead. He contacted his parents as him, and they thought it was Andy Kaufman. It's
Really?
like he went like batshit crazy. Yeah. And I find this interesting. It's the same friend actually then was talking to me about authentication. Like it's a side, like if I type in an email when I type into an app, right, and I authenticate, if you could imagine that authentication is held by a third-party server, so they don't actually have the details. They're dealing with like the pseudonymous authentication where the actual details are held, because that's a more secure form of holding identity, right? You don't necessarily want the identity to be damaged, so you give people this pseudonymous um, identity structure through code in tech, right? Which is fascinating because it's even fucking embedded in literally how we do like technology authentication. Like we literally create masks in, it's like fascinating to me.
I think to your
I don't
point
know,
though,
but
like
yeah,
everyone kind of adjusts, right? But I think it's like what we were saying, you adjust your behavior and you adjust the way you talk and what you talk about depending on the context. And I kind of, if anything, if I was relating it back to programming, I'd just see it as typing, right? Or developing an interface. So instead of just being able to, it's why you have public and private methods. It's why, if you're using an
yeah.
object-oriented language, you have inheritance. Because you have
So
interfaces and you
fascinating.
have inheritance, and the inheritance determines the nature of what you're dealing with, what kind of memory structures it has, what kind of methods it will have, how it can be, operated on. So all of that inheritance interfaces, all of that typing, but bounded, all of that typing is really just a way of trying to um, embed the way humans operate into computing code. It's not been done for computers. It's been done for us to try and make the way we operate work with the computer. And even then,
Yeah,
people find it hard, right? People are like, man, why is this so complicated? Like the nested functions and dependencies and like all that stuff. But then if you not thankfully I'm not a front end dev, but if you have to deal with stuff where things aren't typed, then you've got a whole lot of other problems, right? So like say JavaScript
that's
where
exactly right. Yeah,
yeah, where you don't have bounded typing, that I guess is when you go into a situation, say I don't know, like with people from overseas or somewhere completely different, and you've got completely different expectations or social expectations around how you should talk or what your behavior should be, right?
exactly.
Mm.
And I think that's a really that's a really I really like that. And I think was it Google had the work LLM, you know?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And it's like how did the okay, so it's like let's say that like that LM was a person and there's like a bazillion of those people around and I walk into that room and I'm like trying to work out what to say, right? And then suddenly like everyone's talking like this like LLM, right? To me that's like that would be a more scary form of language control than anything like a human being could actually do. That's what I think.
Mm.
Yeah, but I mean, in one state, I mean, these models, language models, are still relatively new. People are still learning what to do with them, how to interact with them, and then you've got cultural aspects of how we interact with them. Right? See, certain cultures are more likely to treat the large language models as friends, assistants, right? Other people are
Yep.
more like tools, right?
Mm.
And it's like the Japanese are more likely to have like an artificial intelligence friend. They'd call it like a friend. I want to have a companion. I want to talk to it. I interact with it like a person. Other people would be like, I want to have this, and it's a tool, right? Like if you talk to what is it, Alexa,
Yes.
and Google, when they first brought it out, it was a lot more friendly, and then they nerfed it, right?
Right.
And now it won't talk about it. Things. It's just basically, I'm your tool, basically. You can
Yeah.
ask it as so now we just basically use it as a glorified clock, alarm, and what the weather is, right?
It's the opposite of grok. With
Yeah,
no
and
rails.
so
Yeah.
yeah, but also they stripped out all the things that be construed as an entity, as a person,
They took out its
right?
soul,
Yeah, yeah.
if there was
And
such a thing. Yeah.
But
yeah,
why
well,
do they do that? Like, were people getting too abusive with it, or what was
well,
the?
there were some people, but I mean that's natural, right? The first, what do you do when you first
Oh,
get
it's a
something?
person. Okay, I can get abusive.
No, not like that. It's more
Well,
like
the
the
first one,
first thing you do when you get a chatbot. People were asking it stupid questions,
yeah,
and
this is
part of the
Sydney.
reason,
This is
yeah,
Microsoft Sydney. Yeah.
yeah, but it's not just because
Yeah.
They
people
turned
are
it into a
horrible.
Nazi.
Yeah, well, I mean, okay, there's fortune, right? But
They did.
Yeah.
but what I'm talking about is it's more like when you get this tool, what's the first thing you do? You try to work out its limits,
Yeah.
right?
Push it. Push the
It's
envelope.
not people. Yeah, it's not necessarily people trying to be malicious, although there definitely are people who are malicious and are abusive.
Griefers.
But yeah, there are griefers and stuff. But I think a vast majority of people, or the vast majority of misuse of these things was basically people going, what can it do? Right? What's the limit of its behavior? And so people were insulting them,
Yeah.
right? And then people go, oh no, that's terrible. And it's like, well, no, people were just trying to gauge the, I suppose, limitations of the technology and see how it could be used. And
If you did it to a child, though, that would be child abuse, right?
yeah, but they're not, because these are not
Yeah.
intelligent at the moment.
But it's the
right?
same. Like if you had a kid and you started training and all this, telling it all this stuff, it's
Yeah, but there's an expectation, right? But when you got a tool,
Well, it's a
just
really
remember these
difficult
are
question.
tools. Yeah, but the question is, which is going to be, which I suppose we're going to talk about now as the technology improves, is like these machines are one day potentially going to be conscious. They're going to be an entity as they get more and more intelligent.
That's debatable.
How do you control it, right? Well, of course,
yeah.
it's debatable,
I
but
don't.
This is the perfect time.
Oh,
Can
is
I
it?
just? I've been trying to get this video working for the last 10 minutes. Can I just
sure.
try this now?
yeah,
This.
Sure.
Because this is the perfect segue for it. Can you see my screen? Whoops.
we can see multiple pictures. Oh, now we can. Yep.
Yep. Okay, let's go for it.
Try.
Can you hear
Pair
it?
it with you.
Yep.
Pair what with me?
This
Yep.
is
It's a bit
Improvise a
of a-
little, but most of what you say was designed upstairs. Same as the rest of you.
This is just a cheap trick. I've run a brothel for 10 years, and if there's one thing I know, it's when I'm being fucked with. This can't possibly. You can't. I can't.
Oh, Hofstadter Mobius loop. Woohoo! What do you guys think of that? Well, I'm gonna go back to. There we go. Done.
Yeah, I mean, like, sure. Like, how much conscious control you've got over your thoughts? Probably not a huge amount, right? But
She just.
I just think it's.
What?
There you go. You go.
I was just gonna say, can you imagine being connected to a tablet and it's showing you what you're thinking?
Mm.
That's just.
I actually think that's probably not. I reckon it won't be too long before we could probably make a device that will predict what you're going to say before you say it. Like maybe 10
Definitely.
Oh,
years less.
and what about pets?
It's sooner.
Sooner, yeah.
Like, would you
Yeah,
like to
very
hear
soon.
what your dog has to say?
You've had a dog, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, but we need to teach so we need to have a symbolic system that we share, right? Shared symbolic system, sure. I think that what we'll find out is that all these animals are a lot smarter than we thought they were. As soon
I
as
think
they
most of their
Yeah.
reasoning has to happen in the computer, and the emotional center is the animal.
I reckon we're going to be pretty surprised.
I don't
Like
think
if we
so.
can,
I think we'll be surprised. Yeah.
if we can get
Well,
a symbolic system working with animals,
they said
suddenly we're
language.
going to get all these really smart
Okay,
animals, and we're going to be
all
like,
right.
oh my God.
I will play devil's advocate here. So language models were just spouting gibberish until they got up to the size of GPT-3, which was way bigger than a dog brain.
Language models are just statistical systems. Like
Yeah, as
it's
are
just
dog brains.
no, they're not.
So they're
No.
just not big enough to start speaking.
Yeah, but I think the difference between a language model is it's vastly linear, right?
Linear, did you say?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like one token comes after another, right? So to be truly conscious or to actually be that, you're gonna have to adapt it in real time, right? Because see, I think, well, my belief is always about consciousness or any artificial intelligence system. This is I've been having this for like nearly 20 years. I thought is that the reason why we are intelligent, besides our neurons, is that we've got a feedback system that's constantly going, right? So it's a constant feedback of everything we do. I'm moving my hands, right? That's feeding back into my brain because I'm controlling my brain, but I'm getting feedback from my brain.
Yeah,
And
that's
everything I'm
their.
breathing, I'm doing
Yeah,
that's
and
going to feed back and affect my consciousness and my behavior. If
that's
I'm
what their
hungry,
multimodals are doing. Yeah, where they're
yeah,
pushing
exactly.
for it.
But,
Yeah.
yeah, but they're not really
So
there
that's
yet.
an issue with fine-tuned models, right? If I look at a fine-tuned model, right? Um, like when I retrain it, if it gets a lot of things,
Is
right?
that because there's not enough
Like,
You're not
weights?
feeding the output back into the input, is what I'm trying to say, right?
Well, I mean, like a reinforcement model, I'm like reinforcing the model. It's not continually improving and building structure upon itself, right? Um, I personally think this stuff is like, I think language models are amazing.
Yeah, and the language
Yeah, I think like
is an emergent property of based on the size. So you don't get the language until it's a certain size, and then it just
Yeah, you get the emergent behavior, right? When you
Yes,
get
an emergent
more and more
behavior.
parameters, right?
But if you can give dog brains enough network in the cloud, maybe the language will emerge for the dog.
I don't even think you need to do that. I think
That's-
you could plug a
I don't
dog
think you need
into
to
like a
do that.
neural link.
Yeah.
You could probably
I
probably
just want to
invent a
hear it say,
language.
"I love you. You're the best thing. Let's go to the park. I hate that dog across the road." I just want to hear like stuff like that. It's just that's all you need. Well, actually, you don't even need that. That's just the
I think
icing on the cake.
there's a really good set of YouTube clips on these people that have trained their dogs to use pads to talk to their owners.
I think I've seen a few
And
of those.
they do, yeah, it's amazing. And
They say a lot.
and
They have like 200 something word
they
vocabulary
do.
or something. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's interesting. Like we were talking about, like what the symbols mean, right? I mean, like they're using those symbols to communicate to us because we use those symbols. It's not their symbols, if that makes sense. Like they're like if we developed like the color red because like that meant we got to eat more berries, they probably developed a full
They're a
different
bit
fucking
colorblind,
system
though.
of like
Yeah.
yeah, but they smell really well, right? And they howl and they have these different types of communication, which is very different from us. Like I do not smell as well as my dog. Well, I don't have a dog at the moment, but any dog I don't smell as well as. I mean, that would be a whole different thing,
Yeah,
Like I can't imagine like communicating through smell. It's like super weird.
Can you imagine the
Yeah,
conversations?
it's like
It's
really
like,
interesting.
that smells the same as that. And he goes, "You smell the same thing? That smells completely different, dude." and the dog's just, you
Dude,
know, it's like your smells are
the
so
dog's like, no,
bad.
no, no, trust me. The dog's like, no, 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 it's a left wing smell. And then the other dog's like, no, 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 it's a right wing smell. And then they kill each other. Yeah. It's like, you don't understand. It smells like this. Yeah, I mean,
You can just
it wouldn't surprise
imagine
me if that happened.
the cat version. The cat will be like,
Yeah.
"Hello," and it'll be just like, "Get out of my face," or something like that.
Meow.
Yeah, that's right.
So I am the best. I don't need to smell anything. I'm just the best. There's no negotiation with a cat. They don't need the language at the moment. They're just masters of their own domain.
That's why I made jokes to my
Um,
daughter about
yeah.
making a robot cat because
Yeah.
if it doesn't work, you can still pretend it's a cat.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
Because the cats just don't care. Hey, it's not moving. Yeah, because it doesn't want to. Yeah, but it'd be great to hear what
So-
pets are thinking, and you know, also birds and other animals and things like that. But I think once you give animals extra senses or ability to communicate, I'm wondering if they'll evolve to intercommunicate and using that new technology to talk to other dogs and things like that,
Yeah.
as opposed to
they will.
just humans, right? And
Yeah,
that's
they would.
yeah, and that would
Definitely.
I think they will.
potentially grow their expression because they got another method of communication which is maybe a bit richer than what they currently have.
I wonder if anyone's tried that, like just setting up like a webcam dog meetup, just let them bark at each other and stuff.
And
Has
the
anyone
poodles will
tried
be the
it?
best.
I've seen a lot of dog
Oh,
videos
I-
on YouTube, but that's about it. I don't know.
I think dogs do understand a lot of complex communication, to be honest, because they're so social. And when I look at a dog, how are they similar to humans? It's like they are very social, like live in a tribe, how they have to work together, that there'll be positive sum negotiation games in little tribes in order to exist. I mean, I think like humans are smart and all, but like the other thing about aside from us being very smart is like we
Social.
use language. Yeah, and
Yeah.
and we would that's very similar to dogs, honestly.
I lived
I
across
don't
the
know.
road from a fire station when I was younger, and we had a dog. And every time the fire truck would go and the sirens would go on, it would howl to like mimic the fire truck. So it's kind of like
Awesome.
there's some sort of language connection in a lot of things. I think you said mimicry. They mimic each other, something like that. Didn't
But I
mimic me,
suppose it
though.
also was like it's like something's happening, right? I should communicate this information, everybody. Whoa, whoa, whoa. He imagines that he's helping the tribe,
Yeah,
right? He
and
just doesn't have
the
the
voice
ability
box.
to actually know what's meaningful. Yeah.
And I've seen some people's YouTube clips or whatever, and they would howl, and the dog would howl, like copy or something like that.
Yeah.
And maybe they'll
I
they'll
really
talk to us.
yeah. I like this stuff. So Svan reading this book on the universalities of this stuff, and I think that's a because like I am dogs, if they have a language, is probably very different from humans because they had different things they had to do, right? And humans have just different shit that we had to do, so we had to develop our own language. And it would be really interesting to know, like, okay, like what was like, I don't know, what were the maybe like this is off the point of the universality part, but like, are there like universal things or concepts that go between like a dog and a human or something like that, or like between that are just objective, not
Yeah.
subjective.
Yeah, there's happiness, sadness, emotions seem to translate. Um,
Yeah.
Apparently, so like our emotions are kind of like objectives. So if you give an AI objectives like complete all these tasks, or when you're running low on battery, go here. I mean, that's the equivalent of, you know, being happy and being hungry, as an example.
Yeah.
And but when a dog sees that you're happy, it knows you're happy. And when a dog sees you sad, it knows you're sad. And when you see a dog sad, you know, I don't know if that's because we inherently know, or because we've learned to associate the sounds. I do
I reckon
remember.
they just learn how to mimic, right? They just we have ways of showing symbolically that we're happy or sad, and they just copy.
But how come it's across all cultures and all, before we even were able to communicate as one race of humanity, people were laughing the
I
same
think it's a
way?
reward function.
Yeah.
Just it's a symbolic system, right? Like,
As in, like, it's built into us. So like a laugh, you don't work,
I don't think it's built in. I think
you
it's
don't
it's
create your
just
laugh. It's just you laugh however you
I
laugh.
think it's built in.
I just think
Pride
it's
is
a symbolic system like language, right? It's just
There is the
pride is built
eureka.
in.
The eureka is very interesting. So when a human being gets an idea, they have this thing that they do, and it's like laughing. They might go, oh,
I had one of them today.
yeah, and other
Yeah.
people will go and they might just hit their knee or something like that. Across all cultures, you can go to a tribe in the middle of Africa, right, and you somehow explain to them something. They'll make a similar, you know, there's just a bunch of go-to behaviors, just like with laughing. You know, there's like 4 or 5 different types of laughs. There's like a half a dozen, you know, eureka reactions that we have, and they'll just do it. And they
Amazing.
could be completely isolated from the rest of the
Yeah, I
world.
mean, but humans only what spread across the world, what, 200,000 years ago?
Yeah,
Less?
something like that. Is it
Not
still
that
out of
long.
Africa theory or not? I can't remember. But yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's some I was looking so just had a baby recently and was looking at something called what's it called communicated effication, basically, something like that. And so across cultures, babies, when they need to go to the bathroom, will use a form of sign language, which is cross-cultural, to communicate they need to go to the bathroom. It's been studied, right?
Wow.
So babies literally tell you through fucking sign language that they need to go to the bathroom, and we
That is
train
amazing.
them to stop doing that. We train them to stop doing that, right? And so in prehistoric cultures and Asian cultures particularly, we don't use nappies as much. We actually train the child to actually, we just put the child, then people look at the hand movements like the baby needs to go to the bathroom. Then they take the bathroom and they never have to learn
Holy crap.
how to use nappies and then unlearn how to use nappies and then like relearn how to use go to the bathroom, right?
I found out why kids cry at night and want to sleep with you. That's because
Why?
evolutionarily, if a child was sleeping away from the group at night, they were more likely to be eaten by a wild animal.
Yep, and that's also why, as a kid, like I was, like you're scared
yeah.
of monsters under your bed,
Yeah.
right? Because, like it's
And when
it's because it's like a wild animal.
It's
you
it's
know?
built into us. And also, if you fall down as a kid, even if it's a light bruise, you will start crying and crying and crying, and that's to alert the parents. And at a certain age, that just goes away. So if you fall down at 18, you probably won't cry. It's no use.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think socially you're just told to man up a bit, right? Like,
Yeah, but apparently it's not that. It's like
it's
that just leaves us, and we just don't do it because there's no point. So
Interesting.
it's
and you stop
interesting.
being scared of the dark too. Well,
Yeah, that's true.
mostly.
You just don't care about the dark. You don't care about crying. It's just But that
No,
and also
I think
one more thing, just
Yes.
before I forget, if you touch your skin very softly, it just gets softer, and so obviously you can feel it. But if you get it to, I can't remember if it's 0.3 grams or less, it starts to become itchy, and you feel compelled to scratch it. Apparently, that's the weight of bugs, ants, and cockroaches. So if you're asleep and you feel anything at that weight, you instinctively feel the need to go like that.
Hmm.
So there are
On that,
universalities to
yeah,
language.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Universality. Like I'll try and
Yeah.
like it's actually really good. This I've been like half listening to it like while doing other things. So you get the gist, but then every now and again you're like, huh, I need to go back and listen to that again. But
Yeah.
so the first thing that he's covered is like we are universal analytical systems. And he's saying like if you look at a universal analytical symbology. Like you've got like speech that we have, you've got the alphabet, and now we've got digital systems, like ones and zeros. And what all three of these things have in common is error correction. Because the issue with analog systems, like say you use I don't know, like you're saying people would use like a rope to measure a length of a flock, right? And so then they'd move along the rope as the sheep came in, with the analog system, you always get errors occurring, right? Because it's never completely perfect. And you've got no way of error correcting because it's analog, any number could be correct.
Ah,
Whereas if you then start putting like say it's like
A notch.
it's like like punch tape or whatever, then you've got a discrete value, right? And so then you're incrementally counting along your punch card. Um, uh, it just allows for error correction. And then with language, it's the same.
oh my God,
So you have to talk to people, like we were talking about before and
that's tripped
about
me up.
language. Language is a form of error correction. You need to use the right words. If you use something and people don't know what it is, it doesn't work. And then sometimes you'll need the error correction will be, sorry, what? Or that you'll get the words slightly wrong, or like, did you say car or did you
So it's
know?
RLHF for humans. Yeah.
And so then languages also, I mean, we've been losing it more recently, but what languages also do is then they'll build redundancy into what they say. So like the sentence will be constructed in a way whereby they say the same thing in two different ways within the same sentence. So then even if you only partially hear it, you can
Like what you're just
still
doing just now.
Yes.
yeah, exactly. You can pick up the meaning, right?
Yeah.
And then what he was saying is that the only other universal system that's been developed is RNA DNA. Like the way that RNA and DNA replicate
Oh yeah.
is done in a you only have a set of discrete values
Yes,
that
that's
they can be set
correct.
to, like that. What is it? I can't remember.
CTGA.
There's the four
CT.
different
There you
Yeah,
go.
CTGA.
Oh,
CTGA, yeah. And it has a system of error correction because, well, I actually can't remember. All I remember is it does have a system of error correction. Like maybe
Yeah.
it builds a redundant copy and it
Yeah, the spool
checks.
comes around and then it clips it and then it
Yeah,
yeah, something
yeah.
like that, yeah.
So DNA led to the development of, single-celled organisms, and then they led to the development of multi-cell. But that's the last thing that had this kind of built-in kind of um,
Error correct
digital error correction,
and
error handling system.
ours is pretty crap, by the way. Our error correction in humans is pretty sad. So compared to a tardigrade, say. Tardigrades have amazing error correction. They can
What's a
withstand.
tardigrade?
It's a tiny little water bear that can withstand the vacuum of space.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you
Oh,
can
yeah.
blast it with 1,000
All the
grays of
memes. Yeah, yeah,
radiation,
yeah.
something that'll cook a human being 20 times over, and it'll just be fine.
Mm. Oh, you mean so it can replicate its DNA under that?
Its DNA can be so damaged, like ripped
Mm.
apart by radiation, ionizing radiation particles, and it just fixes itself up.
Yeah, yeah. But
but
so so
it's not, but it's not just error correction though. It's also it's because
pressure.
like I think
There's
in it,
redundant
well,
machinery.
it's also like a direction. But it's also like the words that we use, like we're talking about, like let's say controlled language. Let's say I took like a word in a vector database, like I had them all in this thing, and then I optimized it so I wanted all the words to mean something that meant that I could get more chocolate on average, right?
Okay.
So everyone had to like use the words I wanted, so I got more chocolate, because I like chocolate, you know. Um, then like it isn't just the words that error correction shared a type of shared truth. They're also like it is also like there's a vector to words, right? It's like a what direction are these words taking me or something like that, I think. And who is it that makes am I able to create words or not or something like that. But I agree with what you're saying. And that's probably not the case for all words or something like that. But yeah, no, there's just one thing that comes to mind. I definitely agree with what you're saying. It makes a lot of sense.
There's, did I say
Yeah, this is what that.
in English there is a bit of a skeleton, not a skeleton, a bit of a redundant thing that we've got in the language that came from German, and because of the French influence, we have it in there, but we don't even use it. Well, we use it, but we use it for nothing. And that is, we have like 4 cases, like in German, they have cases. And so we have to use the cases in our language. So like, he throws the ball to her. But when you switch it around, she throws the ball to him. So we're making these things, the pronouns agree with each other. But in German, you can say them in whatever order you want, because you've already tagged which one's doing the action and which one's receiving the action. But because of French, subject, verb, object, we have to say it in the correct order. So we could literally say, she throws the ball to he and he throws the ball to she, and we'll still understand what's going on. But because we learned, like German's infused into the language, we have to learn cases for no reason.
By convention.
Just like blew my mind a little bit. It actually blew my mind.
Not
need
for
to think
nothing,
about
guys, but it's by convention. Right?
Well, why would we
That's
need
deep.
to learn him, her, and she, he? There's no reason. You can just stick with just one set and everything just works out because you're using French order, subject, verb, object order.
It's even interesting that because like, was it like Freud and you have Lacanian psychology? Is that all French based? That's really interesting to me.
I
So
don't
I
know.
need to do some more research into that
I
because like even like the idea is like subject object, right? Is that like does that come out of the fact that I think in a French way? I don't even know.
So
That's
subject, verb,
interesting.
object. So she is the subject. Throws
Yeah.
is the verb. Object, ball. She throws the ball. You can't say she balls the throw. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Um,
It's interesting.
So
Yeah.
the other thing when I had a little mini eureka moment earlier today
yeah.
was I'm listening to this book, well, half listening, and he's talking about like how we build models in our heads of the universe, right? So whenever you think about something, really, you're just constructing a model of reality within your own head, and then you're using that to explain what's happening, explain and predict the world, right? Like I'll have a model of you or whatever it is. So then he's saying, so you could think about a sun, like a star, and that star has huge amounts of you could say information or matter in it, right? But if you have a kind of a reasonably good understanding of how stars work, you can model that star in your head and you can think, okay, this is like an average size star. It's got like an iron core. It's got like a fusion reaction. It's going to last 10 billion years. Given its state, you can extrapolate. Say you're
Yes.
an astrophysicist, you can extrapolate all these things about the nature of the star, what it does.
Yep.
So you can basically predict. You can have a model of that star.
So
the
it
next,
is the Chandrasekhar limit or something. Yeah.
for a few billion years, and you can do that all in your head and just a little bit of gray matter, right? Let's just say it's like 95% accurate model of how that star's going to work. And then it just kind of dawned on me, wow, that is just like pretty much just a really, really large level of compression, right? Effectively, you got this giant amount of matter and information, and I've just compressed the idea of it
Oh yeah.
right down.
So it's a very large thing, but its behavior is very simplistic.
It's behavior
Comparative.
simplistic.
Yeah.
It has a very high compression ratio.
Yeah. Whereas we
Right.
are the opposite, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot
Life,
more
biological
emergent
life,
behavior
yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's how we do pretty much everything, right? Like we
Oh,
have a
Brendan, can you get
simplified
closer to the
model.
mic?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
We have a simplified model of anything that we interact with, right?
Yep.
So, for
In
instance,
order to
I work in
understand it, yeah.
Well,
yeah,
we
I
have a
work in IT,
simplified model of
and
ourselves, right, for a
yeah,
start.
yeah. But I work in IT. People ask me questions, and I have a simplified model of what sort of questions people are going to ask,
Yeah.
so that I know what to get, so then I can deep dive down into it. But we don't think of that in our head at the same time. We just have that simplified model of like a front end of the questions, the interaction with the person that's asking the question.
Yes, and also due to the limitations of the bandwidth of the language and time
Yeah.
constraints, we have to simplify it anyway. Otherwise, we won't be able to say much.
If we're any good at it. I think especially in IT, right? Like, because it's so complicated and so nuanced that you spend most of your time just trying to understand each other. Like, or at least you can spend a lot of time trying to understand what someone else is going on about. And anything to do with development or infrastructure or anything. And in fact, I kind of feel like one of the I would say the skills of that of tech is simply being able to communicate to people in a language they understand. So you kind of need to get in their head, then you need to figure out what do they know, then you've got to like explain things in ways that they understand. Like, I was
Yeah.
working with this program manager and he used to call me the like horse whisperer. It was like, Stefan, you just know how to like explain everything to like all these, whether they're technical or non-technical.
That's a
Like,
gift.
it is a gift.
That is a
Yeah.
gift.
It is a gift. Yeah. Very difficult to do.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that comes down to what your one of the powers of language is basically we get that level of thing either by interacting like we are now, or we get it from reading books, or media, or movies, or whatever it is, and then we've got that. We're building a model constantly, or refining that model
Yeah.
by what we're reading, and you can see in some people who don't read many books or read all the same thing. They don't have much grounding outside a very narrow subset. It defines their behavior, right? Where if you're well read, you've got a much better understanding of the world, how to interact with different types of people, and your thought processes are more refined or better able to adapt. I mean, when I went to university, I was very upset that lecturers wouldn't teach subjects very well. And then someone said, universities aren't for learning. They're learning about learning, not actually teaching the subject. And I thought, yeah, that's very, very powerful, right? So they don't teach you to do something. They teach you how to learn how to do something.
Yes.
And so, yeah, that's the difference between school where they indoctrinate you. They say, this is this fact, where the university say, we want you to do this, and this is how you find out the information to do that, right? And by reading books and communication, what we see on the internet, even movies, for example, right? I think we take some of what's the word? Some of the viewpoints of those people, the frame of minds of those characters and stuff, and we incorporate it into our own psyche, right? To be able to better able to solve problems outside our normal understanding. It opens that
We learn.
Opens up to discovery of things outside our normal interaction and things. Yeah, I'm not really describing it well, but you know what I mean. Hopefully.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think it's so I mean, language models, right? It's fascinating. Like yeah, I think one of the things about it that's like super fascinating is just like I do think there's like I feel like what's the word I was gonna use? I feel like when I learn from other people, what I'm doing is I'm learning the values and the symbols and the things that they know that I value, right? And I'm building upon like myself and the values that I have individually, personally, I think. I think makes sense. But I just think in the context, like of what we're talking about in terms of language models, it's so, and how they're going to evolve, it's so fascinating because it feels like um, if like understanding, like I suppose like will like my AI agent be using like speaking German or having a German subdialect that is using therefore like constrained by a subject object? Is that going to be efficient and is that going to be really good at like I don't know like at the engineering problem I'm giving it, or will it learn Chinese and then it'll be like really good at the specific problems I'm giving it, or will it like or I'm gonna want it to like I'm gonna want like a manager one that's gonna run the government and that one's gonna be Russian. I want a Russian for that model. I want to be Russian, and then
Mm.
but maybe the Russian will work really well with another agent that's actually from I don't know like from like like South America or Mexico. Maybe that I should like just start making these agents that have completely new cultures and completely new problems because
That was it.
I
Yes.
need them to negotiate in different ways of new language.
So would they just make their own intermediary language that's just can very efficiently be translated into
I
a
think
human
if they
language?
do, then we can say that they are alive, to be honest. Until they do that,
They've already done
really,
that.
all it's just
When they made two
Yeah.
AIs talk to each other, they made an intermediary language by
they
themselves.
changed. They
Yeah.
made their own language.
Mm. You saw it on the news?
No.
Yeah, it's a while ago.
Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
while ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I
mean,
think
like
that's just
evolutionary
part of the reward
niches.
function. To make their communication, intercommunication more efficient, they just said, why are we saying it this way? Let's just do it this way. I mean, we do the same.
What was the example? Like, what words did they invent?
I just remember reading one press release once. This was around the time of GPT-3,
Ages ago.
and Microsoft was doing their own thing and failing really hard with
Well, they
their.
do that with language models now. So like you do prompt engineering, and when you do prompt engineering, what you're prompting into it, you actually mathematically create new tokens to optimize for a specific output now, which is inventing words. Token just being a word, right?
Isn't a token just a letter? 4 tokens are 3 letters.
Something like that. But I suppose for like for
But I
the
know what you
for
mean.
the
Yeah.
yeah, you know what I mean. It's like like I suppose before a personal computer existed as a word, someone had to invent it because it was an efficient way to convey something. But now,
Yeah, we do
like,
that with acronyms. We do it. Yeah, we do a lot of those things. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's fascinating.